Hello, you are listening to the Intimate Breath podcast, and my name is Lore. Here we share personal stories and have open conversations about pretty much anything related to intimacy and sexuality. And that is sexuality in the big sense of the word, so it expands way broader than just in a bedroom to really being connected to your body, to your desires, to your needs, and creating a life full of well-being and the life that you want. So today in this episode, I am talking with Louise Mazanti. She is a psychotherapist that I joined in a 5-day workshop many years ago that was called The Invitation. And last spring of 2023, I have been actually reaching out to her to start with some sessions with her, psychotherapy sessions. And we've been diving in some topics that went really deep for me. Those sessions have meant a lot for me. Like I've been several times in a place where my whole identity was shaken up, and I was really questioning some core beliefs about myself and about what I need and why I'm doing the things I'm doing. So I see Louise as a very wise, intelligent woman. And in her facilitation, I've also seen her playfulness. And she also has a very holistic view on things. She's open-minded, she's playful. So yeah, I admire her a lot, and I'm so happy that she wants to talk here on the podcast with us. I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you do, please like this on whatever app you're listening to, send it to a friend, share it with your community, or just send me a message with your feedback. That's super welcome, super wanted. We want to hear from you. So have a good listen. Louisa, thank you so much for making this time. I'm really happy that you want to be a guest on my podcast. And I've had such valuable sessions with you. I also did a week, I don't know how you would call it, training? A course
workshop.
With you?
A workshop, I think.
Workshop, yeah. Earlier, like years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you came across as such a wise, embodied, intelligent woman that was also playful and real, which are also qualities I really appreciate. Do you want to introduce yourself? Who are you?
First of all, Laura, I want to say thank you. Thank you for having me here on the podcast, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. I feel touched by that. It's always wonderful to hear. It makes it very meaningful to do what I do, that it makes a difference for people. So thank you for that. And yes, to introduce myself, it's always this question of who am I? Who am I with my professional cap on, and who am I today with my professional cap on? I am a psychotherapist. I have a private practice, and I work with both individuals and couples, very much centered around intimacy, connection, love, sex, relationship, but also about deeper issues they are very deep issues indeed, but also direction in life, meaning, purpose. When people have a burnout or feel like this society or this life is not for them, that's also something that I care about a lot. And women's work is also something that's very precious to me, the rising of the feminine that's happening collectively. And I do it mainly through my private practice, and also I teach a coaching course for women. So apart from being a psychotherapist, I also run online breathwork sessions once a month, and I run meditations every new moon also online. And those two things that I offer for free for whoever wants to join are some of the practices that are actually most precious to me, because especially the breath work is such a transformational practice. It changes consciousness, it changes how we are in the body, it changes how we experience life. So that's my way of giving back to the community some of the most powerful tools that I have received. And aligning with the new moon and with the energies that are coming cosmically to help us in our growth and evolution and our healing is a part of that collective growth that I'm really here to facilitate. So
Sounds like it matters to you that like those are the things you like most, but you're really giving them and you're really sharing them with as many people as you can because they're so precious to you.
Yeah, I think because one of the real purpose to what I'm doing is not decidedly through my individual practice. It's not like I see myself in my core as a psychotherapist. That's one of the ways I express myself through and how I work with people, and it's deeply meaningful. But I do see the bigger picture, the deeper purpose is to be a part of the awakening that's happening collectively. And I do that individually, and I do it with groups, but that's really what I care about.
Yeah, beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, and with intimate breath, of course, I'm a geek when it comes to intimacy and sex. And
Mm-hmm.
I always have some kind of definition for myself of what it means to be sexually empowered. What does that mean for me? And I got super curious how you would describe that for yourself. What does that mean for you?
What does it mean to be sexually
Yeah.
empowered? I love that question. I think that question has to be responded as a feeling question, not as a thinking question. Because being sexually empowered to me happens when we are connected with our bodies, when we feel what's happening in the body, and when we know what is happening, and when we know what we want and what we don't want. And when we are able to reach out and try to create the experiences that we want. So take ownership of our truth, but it's the truth that we feel in our bodies. And that doesn't mean that we necessarily express ourselves in multiple out there ways. That's not necessarily being sexually empowered, actually. Being sexually empowered means, to me, to be truly in tune with sexuality as it fluctuates, as it changes through, for women, through our menstrual cycle, but also in our life cycles and the things that we are going through. Can we be in tune with where our sexuality is? I want to say moment to moment, and take action from that place. That's, to me, empowerment.
That resonates a lot with me. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, those words are really touching. I can, like you say, it's like a response from the feeling, and I'm feeling it inside of my
Mm-hmm.
body. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a personal example of that, like moment to moment, being true to the changes?
It's probably more a question of phases in my life, of being attuned to my sexuality more than moment to moment. I think I'm pretty good at, I want to say, negotiating sex. I'm very clear with what I want and what I don't want, and I'm not shy anymore to negotiate that. And I think I learned it through moving through phases in my life, where some phases I was monogamous and very committed to, I want to say, just exploring within a relationship. I've also had phases where I was more sexually open and navigated different people. And I think having had multiple experiences of how to manage relationship and sexuality, I think I learned that I'm not one person, and it's not like one truth, but it really changes. And I've had phases where I moved through, this is great, this feels right, and this is me. So I've kind of told myself, okay, now I found my sexuality. And then it changes and something else becomes true. And I think it's the internal permission to attune to what is true right now and have the freedom again and the permission to change that if it changes. I would say that's more how it's been for me. I've allowed myself to play. Also, I've allowed myself to feel like, ooh, that was too much or that wasn't right, and come back. And that doesn't mean I wasn't sexually empowered when I did the things that actually I worked. That's not for me. But that means I tried it and now I know. And next time I take that into consideration when maybe I want to try it again because maybe in that moment it wasn't right. So I want to say it's the ability to play with what is right and learn and continuously adjust.
Yeah, it reminds me of a child that just feels safe in itself to go and try something out without knowing at all what's going to happen. That's a more that's more powerful than just staying with what you know, right?
I actually love that comparison because it's not just it's true. It is the psychological pattern inside that we have, even as grown-ups, is the same as we had as children when we start developing our individual sense of self and wanting to explore the world. That's really how we get to know ourselves. That's how we define who we are. That doesn't change because we grow up. And sexuality is an incredible playground to get to know who we are, as long as, you also gave another key concept, which is, do we feel safe? Because, I mean, now we're changing topic a little bit, but that is really what it's about. To be sexually empowered is the ability to explore while feeling safe, to create safety, maybe to create safety within which you can play.
Yeah, beautiful. I reached out to you because I noticed that I was stuck in some patterns. So, yeah, first of all, I noticed patterns, things that were repeating
Mm-hmm.
themselves and feeling stuck in I want to create one thing and I see myself doing other things that are sabotaging. And I think that was also related to the kind of relating that I have been choosing for before, and also maybe how that
Mm-hmm.
is changing right now, and having someone to help me navigate that change that you also mentioned before. And I think regardless of what relationship style that is, there are always parts that are serving and healthy, and there are some parts that or nuances that are maybe this is coming from trauma, and you really helped me with that. And I guess I want to ask how, let me say, as we work together, I sometimes had this question towards myself, is this now really me? Is this a true longing or a true need that is just healthy to have and to listen to? Or is this coming from something more unhealthy, something unresolved? And I guess I'm wondering if you have some perspective or some tips on how to make the difference, how to see the difference.
It's a really good question. And I think the older and wiser I get, the less black and white I am in thinking what is healthy, what is trauma. Either it's good, it's healthy, or it's bad, it's trauma. Because I think our human experience exists on a spectrum of flow and challenge, and it has to. That's how we evolve. If everything is just flow, we don't evolve. If everything or too much is challenge, we don't evolve either. But it's the healthy balance between flow and trauma. And of course, trauma exists somewhere on the spectrum. Did I say flow and trauma? I meant flow and challenge. And trauma exists somewhere on that spectrum of challenge. If it's too much challenge, it can turn into trauma. So having said that, I would say we flow on a spectrum. And when do we know if our behavior, our desires, or our relational patterns are trauma-based or not? I want to say they're always trauma-based because we're human beings. So we have trauma, we have things that have overwhelmed us and scared us, whether that's a tiny little thing that our parent left the room for 2 minutes when we were a baby, or something more serious has happened to us. Trauma can come in many ways, and experiences can feel traumatic in many ways. So I want to be careful with the too black and white thinking, and rather say, instead of defining that, I want to ask, what's the experience in the present? And is the experience working for you? And is the experience working for your environments, for the people that you're connecting with? So never only ask if is it working for me, because we are connected and we are part of each other, and we impact each other. We are in a relational field, and we have to be so aware of that. So ask, is it working for me? Is it working for the people that I'm connecting with? That's the first step. If it's working, great. It can be trauma-based. People can have sexual preferences that are based on previous trauma, but that are working for them. They're good coping strategies. So that's good. And we can have also no trauma, but the desire to feel so safe that we don't give ourselves permission to play. Or we have too many judgments about playing outside of the good, whatever society defines it, what we have permission to do. So trauma is very relative. So first of all, is it working? Secondly, if it isn't working, look at the reality of what isn't working and the reality of this response you have. And a good way to assess if there's more to this situation than just what's happening is if you are having an emotional reaction that's a little bit out of proportion to what's happening. If there's more emotional charge than what would be natural and normal to a situation, there is trauma involved in some way. And I like to use the concept of first wave and second wave instead of trauma. Because trauma is such a big word that we can get all kinds of association if we really identify with, this is my trauma. So if we talk about first wave and second wave instead, first wave is the original experience that happened backwards in time, somewhere in our past where we felt overwhelmed. And that can be trauma. That will often be defined on the spectrum of trauma. So when we were little, we couldn't cope with an experience. That turned into what I call the first wave. The second wave is how the first wave has washed into now adult life in an experience we're having when we're having a strong emotional reaction, and we can't understand why is this a trigger. Because, if we look at the reality, it shouldn't be that big a trigger. That means that it's a second wave. There is a root cause that's in the past. So in that sense, it's a good way to identify what's going on here. Is it just this is a normal human situation that would feel challenging? Or is it so challenging that, I'm having a second wave here. There's a root cause to something else. And I also, that moment, I want to say that's not a bad thing to realize here's a second wave, because it's always a doorway to healing. If we stay with it and are curious about, why am I having this trigger? What's really going on here? We have the ability to heal ourselves backwards in time. And that's when we finally can liberate ourselves. I mean, we are all moving towards hopefully more and more freedom in our life, in our sexuality, in our relational patterns. And every time we encounter a charge that's very strong, it means there's something that we can heal and unhook from in the past. So if we stay present with, there's going to be a second wave here, it's always a doorway to expansion if we dare stay with it and look at it and confront ourselves.
As I was receiving sessions from you, of course, I didn't hear, the background thoughts of, how you look at things. And as I'm listening to you now, I understand why I'm so drawn to you. I love how you talk about the spectrum. I love how you acknowledge that trauma is such a big word, and it's actually in intimate breath, it's a word that I avoid because I think it can be very easy to keep on focusing on past stories and kind of be stuck there or identify a lot with them. And it's my preference to come back to what is here now. What do you feel now? What is true now? And it was actually a step for me to reach out to a psychotherapist because of that aspect, like a resistance of feels like I've been in contexts where the digging in the past felt a little bit too much for me. And I've never had that experience with you at all. And so I resonate a lot with how the tips that you're giving on how to assess if something is working or not. And also with the people around you is such a beautiful one. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I want to speak to that in the sense of doing a piece of personal work and something that keeps people away is exactly what you say. I don't want to be digging into the past. And I think it's important to just acknowledge that sometimes it's important, but it's always a present. It's always about staying in the present and looking at what's happening in the present that has some kind of, as I said before, some kind of hook that we need to unhook. But it's always about the present. Just going through your childhood in this kind of more traditional Freudian way of analysis and analyzing all and can easily become some kind of regressive identity. So I'm always identified with the child inside, or I'm always identified with my trauma, with my story, which can become a way of losing presence, and it can become a way of losing empowerment because we tell our story about who we are, and it can also be a way of avoiding to take responsibility. To change our lives, to take the actions that we might be afraid of taking because, oh, I'm so identified with my trauma, my fear, my anxiety, so I can't do that until I've solved that. But it can become a way of lulling ourselves a little bit into sleep with what is it that needs attention in the now. It's always about the now. And when you work with intimate breath, you know how important the absolute attunement to what is happening right now in your bodies and in your feelings. It's not about the story that the mind is throwing at you. It's not really important.
I'm wondering if you would agree with me that, like you're saying, that some people would avoid taking action or choosing for something because it first needs to be healed. And for me, the healing is in actually becoming aware of it and then making a new choice or taking a new action. Like that is for me part of the healing, kind of rewriting your own story.
I think this is very true when you say taking a new action, doing things in a different way, because it is in the what is happening in the now. What is a choice that I'm making? Am I going into some kind of avoidant behavior? Am I distracting myself? Am I running away from confronting how uncomfortable it is right now because I'm experiencing a second wave? When something is coming up and we want to check out. We have different ways of checking out and avoiding. And in the way that I work, we go the other way. We go into it and we confront it. I actually don't like the way confronting because that sounds a bit aggressive, but what we do is we meet it. We meet it with compassion, with understanding, with love, and we create the ability to contain our own experience, to be able to stay present with, right, this is happening. It feels very uncomfortable. But when we turn on the light of awareness to, I'm having a second wave experience, it's not just about the now. So the now is not just about the now, just to know that helps us not to freak out, helps us not to be reactive. And it's that moment that you mentioned there, the moment when we make a different choice. I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to break out contact. I'm not going to have a fit. I'm just going to stay present and connected. And then we can make a different choice. That is how we change our lives. And that is also how we rewire our brain. If we talk about neuroplasticity, that's how we change who we are. It's by making different choices in the now. Absolutely.
And for me, like, it really feels like a meeting. It doesn't feel like confronting. When I'm with you, it's so soft and compassionate. And also, I understand why you want to use the word confronting, because it's also, of course, like, you've been avoiding it for so long. And then here you are with Louise being like, let's feel it for a bit, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and for me, part of acknowledging these moments in the past, in childhood, often related to mom, dad, or whoever was close in that time, came with the challenge of actually being true about, hey, my parents weren't able to meet me in everything I wanted or needed. And there was a lot of hesitation for me in that, because I appreciate my parents so much. I acknowledge that, or like, I know that they've always been doing the best they can do. I think they're incredibly loving. They're amazing. and all of that has been keeping me from actually also just being true about, hey, and there are things that I needed that sometimes they couldn't give me, or ways that situations that were handled in a way that had a very big impact on me. And it feels like daring to hold those both truths that they're amazing and that they're also human, feels like a part of growing up. It feels like maturing to me. Every time that happens, I feel a little bit more like, yeah, I am my own person and they are their own person. And in one of the sessions, you also helped me to actually feel a boundary towards my mother that in a way that I've never done before. And I felt 10 centimeters taller just by acknowledging, like, wow, I have a boundary towards my own parent in this way. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more into this differentiation process that happens from baby on all the way up until, I'm 27 and it's still happening. Can you speak a bit more into that?
I'm glad you mentioned it, because it's such a crucial point to realize. It is, as you said, that's a psychological maturity. It happens in the moment that we can hold the dual reality of our parents not being perfect, but being human. As a child, we need our parents to be perfect, because we're born as humans, we're born completely dependent on our parents. We're both physically and psychologically completely dependent. And that's actually where most of our trauma comes from. It's because we're so dependent that any little tiny fracture feels really threatening, because we're so dependent as children, which means that as children, we can't actually bear to know that our parents are not perfect, that they will fail us, that they are dealing with their own struggles, that they have their traumas themselves, their pains. we can't bear to know that. We can't bear to know that maybe they are neglecting us, maybe they are abusing us, maybe things are not as perfect as we need them to be. But as children, that's impossible because that would feel way too unsafe. So we make up these stories, and they are needed for our survival, about it's not about the unconditional love, because I really believe that parents do love their children unconditionally, unless they are really far out on the spectrum of some kind of emotional disorder. But parents love their children, but that doesn't mean that they don't fail them. And I have definitely grown into maturity about that with my own upbringing, and then seeing, of course, I passed something on to my sons, and it's painful and uncomfortable, but I'm human too. But it's in the moment that we can hold both. My parents loved me and they failed me, and I'm dealing with the consequences. There are some real consequences to the failings I experienced, to the neglect, to whatever it is that I experienced. And I still love my parents and they still love me. And both need to be true, because we're human and we have all of it in us. And we act out. As long as we're unhealed and unconscious ourselves, we act out and pass it down through generations. That doesn't mean we're bad people. That doesn't mean our parents were bad people. It just means that they're human and unhealed. And I think there's so many of us right now that are here to do that piece of both personal and collective healing. That's why I said in the beginning of today that the collective is really what I care about, but it comes through the personal experience. We are here to do our own work. And when we can hold that reality of, I'm dealing with some consequences here, that doesn't mean I can't be in contact with my parents. I have to make a big drama or, tell them off or create something I'm not ready to. It doesn't mean that. It can mean that, as you said, I can find a boundary in myself to make a different choice in the moment. Maybe I don't want to go home to my parents every weekend. Maybe I don't want us to go on all holidays together, whatever it is that we're dealing with. That process of becoming your own person, loving your parents for who they are, but not being dependent on them being perfect, and not being dependent on them liking you either. That's also really important. That we step into to not existing in this world to please our parents. And there's so many people that still haven't separated from that belief that they are actually here to make their parents, I want to say, proud of them, or to get validation from their parents, but to also let go of that need so we can become our own independent, psychologically mature adults. That's the only way. And many people stay in, I call it the family we. When grown-ups, people in my practice, they talk about their parents and their family of origin, they say we do this, we do that, that's how we do it. They stay in a family we, which means that their identity is still in the child dynamic. I'm a child in this family and my identity is to be a part of this family, which means that they haven't individuated in order to become their own person that can create their own family and their own we. That's not a we of dependence, but it's a we of creation. I have created my family, my tribe, and it's I have also made myself independent in order to do that. That's really important.
Yeah.
I know that was a long talk about the parent-child dynamic, but it's such an essential part of growing up and becoming psychologically self-reliant.
As I'm listening to you, I'm reflecting where I am. I can hear myself say the we as well, just about certain topics, and then other topics, it's very much, I feel very different as well. It's just interesting to see the different areas. And I was also reflecting when you're talking about holding those both perspectives. There's love and there's failing on each other. Looking at transferring to our romantic or sexual relationships. It's such a typical thing to do, right? Everything I'm feeling towards my father or my mother, that's playing out with my partner, my lover, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds so impossible to not hold those two with a friend, with a lover, to expect them to be perfect and never fail on you.
See, I'm not sure that I would say that's not everyone that has arrived at that lure. So many people still carry the unconscious belief that their partner has to be perfect. They have to meet their needs. And so if I feel a challenge, if I feel an unmet need, it's my partner's responsibility to meet it, as it was my parents' responsibility to meet it when I was little. And many people unconsciously carry those expectations to each other and think that there's something wrong in the relationship if all needs are not met. And I think that the ability to see that my partner is also, it's coming out of the expectation that my parent is perfect and transferring that onto my partner. Therefore, my partner has to be perfect. That psychological maturity of seeing first our parents, then other people, our partner, our partners, to see they're also real human beings with their own wounds, their own gifts, their own desires, their own path. And that we can love and be in connection without the other one necessarily having to, not necessarily, I take out necessarily, without the other having to be perfect, full stop. Can we tolerate the discomfort of the other person not being perfect? That's coming into the reality of life and not living in a fantasy that's actually a regressive child fantasy.
And it's a nice parallel to life and like I was talking with a friend yesterday who has been going through a very rough winter with death and disease, and she was saying, well, the part of me that expected life to be pink and fair like is very gone. And yeah, I somehow heard that now also with like just seeing the almost humanness in life, or like there's nothing fair about anything. But how do we just navigate it?
That thing about life not being fair is something that I care about a lot, because I have seen both in my own life and over again with people that I work with that a crisis is the most potent, the most fertile moment in our life when we really go into our own depth and into the existential core of what it means to be human. Because we gain an incredible amount of wisdom and an incredible amount of compassion, an incredible amount of reality. It's like we are faced, in that sense, we are confronted with reality. And reality is, life is a cycle of becoming and unbecoming, of life and death. It's a continuous transformation. And to be able to align with the reality of life, which is it's a constant transformation between becoming and letting go, between life and death, in everything, in our identity, in our relationships, in our health, in our status, in everything. It's coming and going, in our friendships. And align with that deep reality and be able to stay present while life is doing its thing. And sometimes we can do nothing about that and still stay present. That for me, these are really hugely transformational moments, because we stop running away from, we stop pretending, we stop telling ourselves stories and become acutely present. And that's where we gain the most power. You were asking earlier, like, what is sexual empowerment? And I said, you have to feel it. You have to be present and feel. And grief and crisis and these transitional moments are really painful. It makes us acutely present to how we feel because we can't run away. The pain can be so big, the challenge can be so difficult that we can't run away. And with that, we learn real presence. So it's always a gift. It comes in disguise sometimes, but it's always a gift.
Yeah. When I'm listening to you around the gift or the present in whatever crisis is happening, I'm fully following you. And there's also like a question towards, I don't know how I would describe it, but like I would judge some people easily as like, I don't know how to say it, like drama junkies or like self-development drama junkies. No, but like people that are very strong, busy with self-development, but have a strong focus also on all the things that they should work on or that feel. I know it's not in the same, you're talking about crisis where there's no way out and you need to stay with it and it's intense. And when I heard you say like it's always a gift, I it got me thinking about this kind of like way of living where I guess for me sometimes there's a lack in seeing also the gift in the beauty, in the ease, in the flow. And I think in my work there's a lot of focus also on celebrating things that felt good, noticing things that feel pleasurable, because it can be so easy to like focused on the discomfort. I don't know if my bridge here makes sense to you.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think we're talking about experiences at two different levels, because one level is a life crisis that's thrown at
Yeah.
you. Someone dies, someone gets sick, a relationship ends, or something that happens in the external world that impacts you in a very deep way. Or another thing, it can also come from inside, like a crisis of meaning. I just can't do this life anymore. Something needs to change. So these are big factors that drive us for change, that create great pain, but create deep transformation through pain. So that's the underlying. I want to say that's the core. That can become, in its more superficial interpretations or ways, it can become a way of living. I'm always working on something, but that doesn't come from something that real, but it comes from a different layer. It comes from actually from a sense of self-rejection. I need to be working on something so that I can improve myself. And it can be both, which is a flip side of self-inflation, or you could call it narcissism, the more healthy sides of narcissism, but everything a bit again on the spectrum of I am always working on improving myself because I have to be perfect. So I'm not allowed to have any human flaws, and I have to be so conscious and so well spoken about every aspect of my own human experience. And it can become incredibly self-absorbed, which is at the same time, it's a narcissism. It's a total focus on oneself at the same time as it is also a rejection, because I cannot stay with who I am. I have to improve myself. And also with the comparison that I have to improve myself so I'm better than the others. I'm more conscious. I want to say that's a shadow way of using the deep creative potential of crisis, just using it in a superficial and in a shallow way, but that has to do with more a discomfort of who you are. And again, that means that you can't actually tolerate your own experience. And it becomes a way of living. I am working on myself is a story we tell ourselves versus all the other people that are not, quote unquote, doing the work. And I think we have to be really careful with these judgments that we have about each other, about doing the work or not doing the work, because life will do its work on you. Whether you want it or not, it will happen. Life will happen, and you will have to experience it sooner or later.
Well, I'm so glad you talked, like I asked and you talked into that difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Life will work on you. And when you were talking about this, like constant changing, constant transformation, you were like using some sentences that were deepening into that. It's almost like, whoo, I feel my own. Oh wow, yeah, it's intense. Like it all, like there's nothing to hold on to, and that's just reality. Like,
And Lua, that is, I love that you say it, and we're both smiling right now because that's how it
Mhm.
is. Life is unbelievably scary and overwhelming in one way, and it's incredibly glorious and a huge privilege on the other. Life has all of it, and to tolerate, to live in that existential tension, that's, there's a good reason why we check out in different ways at different levels, because sometimes it's too overwhelming, both the goodness but also all the fear, all the scariness that's also there.
Yeah, it brings a lot of compassion to the checking out, the avoiding, the trying to hold very tightly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Something that I keep saying, especially in my teaching, and also kind of to myself, just as to remind myself, the wounds are
Mm.
real. It's not just words or concepts or theory or philosophy there or psychology. The wounds are real and they're felt real. And through my work for more than 10 years, I just, and through my own personal wounds and my own personal life experiences, I have such compassion for all the ways we find not to feel the wounds, because the wounds are real and they are overwhelming. When we're in it, we know they're overwhelming. So we will try, like sometimes desperately, not to feel what's there, because if we open that to the existential void, it's the existential void. The pain can be absolutely out of any chart. Like we can't actually tolerate our human experience if we really think about it
Mhm.
sometimes. And then we need a little break so that we can tolerate that more. And when we're stable enough, then we can start moving towards all the joy, all the pleasure, all the juiciness, all the playfulness that's also a part of our experience. But if we don't want to feel the difficult parts, we also limit the pleasurable parts. They go hand in hand. If we don't want to feel life, we don't want to feel life, and life is
Yeah.
all of it.
Oh, I hear myself say that often too.
Great. Yeah, it's how
Yeah.
it is, right? Yeah.
Mm. I want to make a little jump. I mean, it's the same subject, but something that I definitely wanted to ask you as well is if you're part of a couple and one of the, or like you as the only one is really struggling with a pattern that became very clear, and or maybe trauma around sexuality, and so one of the two is having this intense kind of like becoming aware, trying to change a habit, trying to find themselves again. um, I'm curious if you would have any tips on that for the other partner also, or for the couple as a whole. um, I see this happen often in my practice, and I've had it myself. I have one example, but that was with a lover. Like I've never been in a marriage or in a like the kind of relationship where a lot was at stake, kind of. But for me, when I started my journey into consent work and learning about the wheel of consent, and also actually your workshop was in the same time, I became
Mm.
so aware of how much I'm pleasing in
Mm.
in settings, any kind of setting with touch. And it had been so clear, like I had been having pain during sex also, I had physical, what's it called? Like ailments coming up that were very clearly showing something. And when I became aware of that, I really needed a proper break. I had two lovers at the time. I told both, like, I won't have any intercourse for as long as I need to. And that was, I think, more than half a year. But that has a big impact on the relationship. It's a big thing for them as well to suddenly be like, hey, I'm seeing this thing now. I want to shift it all around. And so if you're in a marriage or way long, have a family, or like there's a lot more there to lose also. It can be super hard to take that space.
Yeah. It's a very good question. That's I'm sure it's relevant for many people. The first thing I wanted to speak to was when you said I took a break, because that's sexual empowerment. To say right now I'm in a cycle of healing. This is what I'm doing. So you're taking responsibility for yourself, which is absolutely vital. That's how it begins. You have to take self-responsibility. Secondly, you exist in a relational field. You are not just your own closed entity, which means that your partner is part of your experience. So maybe what is coming up for you at that given moment is something that's coming up because you are relating with this specific person. So there's something in the dynamic that is evoking what is being evoked, whether it's a very safe relationship where you finally can actually allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding to feel, or it's a relationship that's less safe and wakes up a second wave of a first wave trauma. It can be both, and it can be anything in between, but it's never just me on my own. It's a relational field, and it's important to be aware of that. And I don't have like a fixed answer to, so how do you handle that? Other than what I can say is that depends on the situation and the couple, but be aware. So it's so important that the person in the couple that is experiencing something sexually does not have to take 100% of the responsibility. There's something wrong with me that I need to go and fix. No, there's something happening in our relational dynamic that makes me feel this. And we're both in the relational dynamic. That's really important, because I see so many, especially women, maybe it is, in fairness, mostly because most of my clients, they are female. But women also have a big tendency to make it about, oh, there's something wrong with me, so I need to go away and fix myself. And it's so important not to turn that inwards, to say we're in a relational field, something is being evoked. And having said that, it's also important to talk about what the partner that is in, quote unquote, holding space for whatever is going on, that the person that is holding space can also take responsibility for their own sense of self and how they're reacting to maybe sex not being available, or something is changing right now. And what are they making that mean? Because if we are not grounded in our sense of self, in our autonomy, in who we are, in our not just confidence, but in our deeper knowing of who we are, if we have what we call a reflected sense of self, so we create our identity based on the feedback we are getting from other people. That means that if my partner is not sexually available and always turned on when I'm making a move, it must mean something about me. And then we start feeling bad, and then we start blaming our partner for feeling bad. So sex is not available, I start feeling bad about myself, I will blame my partner. That's a huge mistake. And so a situation like something is coming up in a couple or in a relating, something is coming up, it's a possibility, it's an opportunity for both to work on the stuff that's coming up for them, both between them, but also in their own sense of self. Who am I when I am not performing sexually, either by choice or because that possibility is taken away in this connection?
Yeah.
So there's always an opportunity to grow, and it's never a free card for the other partner, never.
I feel like adding to the example that I gave after hearing you, that one of the two lovers that I had at that point was also my first boyfriend from at the time. So from years back then, with who a lot of the first times went really not so good. Especially when it came to pleasing. That was just a disaster. Like looking at myself. And so when I talked with both of them and said, hey, I want to take a break when it comes to intercourse, I also invited them both into, hey, and this is what I do want to do. I want to do more of the 3-minute game in very different ways. I want to do ritual play and put a timer there because I know a timer helps me to check in between and notice what is actually happening, if I'm actually okay. It helps me to share what has come up for me. And so with this one person that had been my first boyfriend, also our sex life improved, I would say, more than 10 times, because he just stepped into that with me and we learned so much. I got like I felt so satisfied with that whole, how that whole process went, and the other person wasn't interested in that, and that's also okay. Or like I'm glad I asked.
Yeah. Laura, you're speaking to something really essential, because when we take away this is how we always do, we take away our default mode of operating, of being sexual with each other. We take that away. So we have to be creative and discover. And some people are feeling, I'm not talking about this particular person, I'm talking in general, but it can feel quite challenging to begin to discover, because what happens is that we are actually confronted with who we are. When we discover, when we get out of the habits that we've created, the story we created about who we are, and that's no longer available, we have to explore. And in that kind of exploration, in those experiments, we get to expand our sense of self, and that's an act of courage, because then we're stepping out of the known, and some people feel too uncomfortable to step out of the known. But when you do it, as you say, it's a wonderful example. You discovered that there's sex is way more than what it used to be, because you get out of your own way of the default, which is actually a limited version of what sex can be. So also, if I speak a little bit in general, couples and sexual problems that I see a lot is that people lose the desire to have sex. It's usually one partner that loses it before the other. There's a low desire partner in a relationship, and that's a huge problem. And it's often because the kind of sex that they've grown into having is just not satisfying anymore. And both people can be too scared to step and say, right, we have to change something. We have to get out of our comfort zone. But that's where the growth happens. And you discovered it. So it's a really wonderful example.
Yeah, but that's such a valuable question, right? Like if someone is like, oh, I don't feel my turn on anymore. I have such a low libido. It's like, yeah, but is there anything to be turned on? Or like, well, that's not I'm not phrasing it well, but is what you are experiencing actually just your thing? Is it fulfilling, rather than questioning yourself in the first place, which is also good, but like to look at both.
It's such a blank statement to say I have a low libido. Like, a low libido to what? Do you actually know? Maybe you have a low libido to that particular kind of sex that's an offer right now in your relationship. Fair enough. We often grow we grow bored with sameness. If it's the same for too long, it's just not engaging our nature for change, for stimulation, to keep being engaged.
So, Louise, how can people find your amazing work?
Thank you. The easiest way is through my website, which is louisemazanti.com, and I'm sure you will spell that out, so I don't have to do that. So my website, I'm also on Instagram, again, under my name, and I have a Facebook page, but mainly through my website.
Yeah. And as usual, that's going to be in the description, so you can easily find it there.
Thank you.
And then I receive your newsletter as well, so maybe if people want to be notified about your breath work or your meditations, they're always in there, right?
Yes, that's through the website. There's a link to sign up for my newsletter.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. It was a joy to have you here.
Thank you. It was a joy to be here.
I'm really happy that more people get to hear you, maybe through my channel as well.
Thank you, Laura.